All right. So I have roughly 12 to 15 flights here on the Armor 65. This is the Armor 65 Pro version. I just want to talk about my experience and some tips and tricks that I've found. One thing to notice right away when binding, I'm borrowing a friend's Tyrannus. I think this is the 9X. I'm not super familiar with the FR Sky line of transmitters, as I primarily fly Spectrum and Tactic. I had to double check the instruction manual on the FR Sky XM receiver to get it to bind correctly. There's a little button on the bottom that you have to access to press to turn on to bind with. Even then, when after I bound, things weren't working correctly. I couldn't get it to spin up. It was pretty cool. In the manual, there is a personal. I tested this, and it flew, and it worked, and everything's in the package, but it wasn't working for me. So since I wasn't getting any responses from receiver input, I went on the flight, hooked it up to the beta flight configurator, and I actually ended up having to change the aileron, throttle, elevator, rudder mapping from FR Sky to Spectrum. Don't know why. That's what I had to end up doing. Once I did that, my receiver started to respond in the beta flight configurator with the proper inputs. On the transmitter, I enabled switch SF. That maps to aux1 in beta flight. That's my arming switch. So once I did all that, I was able to get the receiver to work, everything bound up correctly. Inside the armor on the flight controller, I'm not sure if I can get it on this video here. Yeah, I can. So inside the armor on the flight controller are two switches, two little pads to press. One of them is your bootloader, and the other one is actually your VTX signal or channel selection. The armor only comes with a 16-channel VTX, and it's clearly expressed in the manual. 16-channel VTX, and it's clearly expressed in the manual. One thing that the Pro version does come with is this LiPo checker. I have no idea how well it's going to work for you on the camera. But you plug it in, your LiPo in. This is the larger style connector. Plug it in, and you have lights from 3.7 all the way up to 4.3 because these are high voltage lithiums. So you can use this little checker to check your status of your packs. This charger, I've only used it connected to the USB port. I have not charged up a 2200 3S LiPo to charge. But charging via USB port, the instructions are cleared. Only use ports 4, 5, and 6 when you're charging. I use a 5-volt wall charger, and I can charge all three of these batteries in about 30 to 45 minutes. I've not flown this outdoors. It's been too cold. It's been way too windy for me to feel comfortable with it. Indoors, on a flat line, the Armor 65 picks up a ton of speed. I actually crashed into a picture frame, knocked it off the wall, and broke the glass in it with this. So don't underestimate the speed this guy can carry. Some other things that I've found useful here is that if the Armor 65 takes a pretty good tumble or hits something fairly hard, you need to disarm and wait 10-15 seconds, then rearm, and the props will spin up. I guess the flight times, the manual advertises 4 to 5 minutes. I find that I'm getting closer to 3 to 4 minutes. I personally don't like flying my LiPos down low. I prefer to take care of them. So this LiPo checker every time has been around 3.7 volts. You really want to store your LiPos around 3.8. Since there's not a storage charge on this, it's a different connector than what I have for LiPo chargers that would work to a storage charge. I try not to fly below 3.7. So finding my flight times, I keep closer to 3 minutes than the 4 to 5. But if you have a way to be able to put the lipos on storage, you can get the 4 to 5 minutes. If you're not aggressive in your flying, you spend more time picking it up, sure, you can probably get a little bit closer to 5 minutes. The other thing is I haven't really had any success trying to update the firmware on the flight controller. It is kind of awkward to connect to the Betaflight because the USB port, the micro USB port, is on the bottom, sticking out 90 degrees. So you can't get the quadcopter to sit flat and level if you're hooked up to Betaflight, which means the gyro calibration might be off a little bit because you're going to have to hold it level with the cord coming out. That's just a minor thing. It's more of an inconvenience. I mean, honestly, if it's up and running, you don't really need to be messing in Betaflight unless you're just one of those that wants to just test out new stuff. The VTX has worked very well. I've used this UVC receiver. I've used my Eachine VR011s. And I've used my Eachine VR007s. The signal picked up. Was able to pick up the signal with all the three of those. So it's standard 5.8. Man, I'm just blown away by this package. This is the Pro package, which means you get the 3 lipos, the lipo checker, the Armor 65, a nice charger, you get extra props, you get the extra canopies, and you get a prop changing tool. I don't have cats and dogs, but hair gets wrapped up around these motors quite easily. So I've had to take my props off after a couple, every flight or so, and check them and make sure hair's off. So that's just a little thing to keep it on the lookout for. But I mean, if you're looking for a fantastic indoor FPV quadcopter that can take a beating, I mean, mine has tumbled downstairs. I've slammed into picture frames. I've slammed into walls. I've slammed into Legos and toys. I mean, you name it. This thing has taken a beating. And it's still surviving. These are still the original props. I got a little nick in one, but it's still flying well. The frame's not even dented. If you're an FrSky user, for $89.99 US dollars as of March 2017, this is a fantastic package. This is the FrSky version. It's the only version out there right now. But if you're an FrSky user, it's definitely worth the money.